Welcome to Grade 1 View, the podcast for future CRNAs by future CRNAs, a partnership between FAANA and Beyond the Mask.
Whether you're about to graduate from a nurse anesthesia program, trying to get accepted to nursing school, or you're somewhere in between,
this podcast is a resource and safe space for all things nurse anesthesia.
We're your Season 2 host team. I'm Levi Davis.
I'm Kelsey Muir.
I'm Mackenzie Lane.
And I'm Nicolas Alexander. So grab your Mac or your Miller, turn up your flows, and get ready, because this is Grade 1 View. So welcome back to the Grade 1 View podcast, a podcast for future CRNAs by future CRNAs. And this is Nicolas Alexander, and I'm joined here with Kelsey Muir.
Hello.
And in honor of Black History Month, today's episode is about representation, visibility, and the responsibility we all share in shaping the future of nurse anesthesia. I'm incredibly honored to be joined here by Dr. Lena Gould and Dr. Vincent Ford, leaders, educators, and advocates for the CRNA community. Through mentorship, education, advocacy, they're actively changing what access, equity, and opportunity look like for the profession. Today, we'll talk about why diversity in nurse anesthesia matters, what representation truly means in education and clinical practice, and how the next generation of CRNAs, especially students, can be a part of meaningful change. Dr. Gould and Dr. Ford, thank you both so much for being here.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Yeah, of course. Thank you both so much to be here. I'm incredibly excited to have you both on. I'll start with you, Dr. Ford. Can you share a little bit about your personal journey into nurse anesthesia and what initially drew you to this profession?
Absolutely. Well, thank you first for Grade 1 for having me and us. And I'm happy to tell you a bit about my journey into nurse anesthesia. It started with my grandmother a couple of generations ago, who at about 42 decided to go back to school and become an LPN.
Wow.
Based on her hard work and efforts, the following generation, including my mother and 7 other family members, they all became nurses or people in healthcare. And then it came to our generation. Well, anesthesia or nursing was never an interest of me. As a matter of fact, as a child, I would always tell my family that if I ever get sick, that's what you guys are here for. You're the professionals. Well, after a career in a couple of different things, which included education, leadership development, some sales, I decided that I wanted to be a present father. The funny part about that is I didn't have kids yet. So I looked around to see what professions could pay a fair wage that could help people and that could have impact in the community. I narrowed it down to law and to healthcare. And then 2 friends of mine who I have to give a shout out and recognition to, Timmy Ajibade and Stephanie Coleman Smith. One was already a CRNA and Stephanie was in CRNA school. And as they walked with me through that journey, they asked me one day, have I ever considered anesthesia? And that answer was no. After researching it, talking to them, understanding the immense amount of stress that Stephanie was going through at that time, I thought I would give it a shot. So I sold all my possessions, decided to go all in on nursing school. And in my mid-30s, I got admitted to Virginia Commonwealth University, and the rest is history. I knew I always wanted to educate at some point, and now I have the opportunity to do that. So that's kind of my journey in a nutshell.
Wow. Dr. Ford, it's funny because in my admissions essay, I feel like I've had kind of a similar experience. Like it feels like I'm a cat and I've had 9 lives and this is my, final life. And that kind of feels like what it is for you. You've had a whole life experience prior to this. And here you are in your 9th life being an advocate for folks in the CRNA community. So pretty cool.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, I think I may have a couple of other lives, but they'll all be associated with anesthesia. I'm not dipping out on you all. I'll definitely still be around.
Good.
However, my experiences prior to anesthesia really do help impact the way that I deliver anesthesia, as well as my upbringing. So I'm thankful for all the things that came before anesthesia, and I'm happy to infuse what I am and who I am into what I do going forward.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I love that. And we'll go to you, Dr. Gould.
Oh, wow. So many of you may know about the organization that I founded. It's called Diversity in Nurse Anesthesia Mentorship Program. It's a national organization that is a national award-winning organization, evidence-based model. But the thing is that I wanted to say that first, but I have to make sure that I acknowledge the CRNA mentors that mentored me while I was in the nurse anesthesia program. And this is in 2002. So just like Dr. Ford, I was also a auditor in New York City. I had another profession before I went into nursing. After I got married, then I had went into I went back to school for nursing. My first position was as an OR nurse, and that's where I met for the first time CRNAs in the operating room. I didn't know about it in nursing schools. I did not have any faculty of color. The chief CRNA was a Black woman, and I wanted to be just like her. And after I worked a couple of years in the operating room, I knew I had to go back and work my way up. I left the OR, went to telemetry, and then worked trauma. And then once I worked trauma, then I applied to nurse anesthesia program in Philadelphia. So when I was in the nurse anesthesia program, when I was accepted, that after that first year, we had a poster project, and we were assigned to do anything that was related to nurse anesthesia. So in Philadelphia, there were 6 nurse anesthesia programs, and what we found was my cohort and other cohorts. Sometimes we were in classes together from different programs, and that was kind of unusual back in the day, but that's what we did. What I noticed right away was that the nurse anesthesia faculty were all white. There were no faculty of color in the nurse anesthesia program. This is in Philadelphia. The nurse anesthesia cohorts, there was maybe 2 or 3 nurse anesthesia students of color in each cohort. So I wanted to do a poster project on diversity in nurse anesthesia. I didn't know where to start, honestly. And it was my program director who said, why don't you start with the AANA? Try to find out what the demographics were. So I got that information. I actually started taking pictures of the students that were in my class that was somewhat diverse at that time. It was 5 of us. And I took pictures, put that on the poster project, shared the data that was given to me from the AANA. I also was able to interview those nurse anesthesia students from different programs in Philadelphia, and it actually mirrored each other, right? So it was a severe underrepresentation of nurse anesthesia students of color in the Philadelphia area and at the national level. So what I did right after that, at that point, and I'm not sure if any of you know who Dr. Art Swirling is, but he was the program director at University of Penn. He was the inaugural program director then. And I told him about my poster, which I received an A grade, right? But there was something wrong. I went up to him and I told him about this. And he told me, he said, Lena, he said, I want you to go to the AANA meeting. He said that you may meet some people, but there's something there that no one else is actually addressing. And I didn't understand what he was talking about. So I ended up going to the one in Boston. And all I remember was I walked into the main building, the main hotel where all the CRNAs were staying. And my hotel was at least 12 blocks away. And I walk in, and who do I see first? Is a Black woman, retired Black woman who had a cane. And I didn't know who she was. And there was a long line of other people who were waiting to meet her. And I said, who is that woman? And they said, that's Goldie Bragman. And I said, who's Goldie Bragman? They told me that she was a past president of the AANA in 1973. Well, wait a minute. I just got an A on a project for diversity in nurse anesthesia in my professional prospect class. No one mentioned her name. I didn't know about her. I didn't know she existed. Now, here I was proud of this Black woman that was a chief CRNA. And here I'm meeting for the first time a Black woman that was the president of the AANA. Well, I was on line with everybody else. I went to go approach her, and I told her how proud I was to actually meet her. And I told her about my project. And she told me, and the way she talked to me, she was like, baby, she said, you're on to something, right? So, and all I remember was that's when I found out my purpose in life, right? I knew that I was going to do something related to diversity or diversifying the nurse anesthesia profession at that moment. So it was the CRNA mentors, Dr. Art Swirling. And after that, Ms. Goldie Bragman was my mentor. I contribute the success of this program to those 2 mentors that I had. They also became the AANA Agatha Hodgins Award recipients. So to be mentored by those 2 who became AANA Agatha Hodgins Award recipients, I know I am blessed to know who they were, the position that they held, the advocacy that they did, and what they poured into me, I'm pouring into others. That's exactly what I've been doing. And I definitely have to mention those 2 mentors that influenced me heavily when I first started.
Wow.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that.
That's really impressive. I had read an interview, so I know a little bit about your backstory. I'm actually at a school here in the Philadelphia region as well. So I know you went to Tornetta, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So, and everything there, and just reading about your journey in terms of kind of seeing the or lack of representation. And that's what kind of really sparked you to really start your own program, which is doing amazing things. So what a great backstory. Thank you for sharing that.
And if I could just mention something. In 2003, when I was a nurse anesthesia student, on the website of the AANA, on the core values, diversity wasn't even expressed on there yet. It wasn't until many years later, even after I became a CRNA, and I was still doing the work. Juan Quintana was the first and only Hispanic CRNA that was the president of the AANA, and he made me the chair of the Diversity Task Force. With that work that we did with Juan Quintana and past president of Dennis Bless, we were able to make sure that diversity was part of the core values of what it is today. So I'm very proud of that.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Wow. Well, I feel like you've already kind of talked about then in terms of like representation and how it's kind of impacted your career, Dr. Gould. But I guess this kind of still kind of going back to both of you is, I guess, tell us how representation has actually impacted your career and why you think it's kind of important to have that diversity, not only in textbooks, but also kind of the academic material that we're reading.
Well, I can answer that question, but I'll pose a question to you all first. Kelsey, have you ever been sick in a different country before?
Well, that's a really good question. I have been actually, yeah, down in
What was
South
that
America.
experience like?
I never entered a hospital, I'll say that, but did need to seek medication at a pharmacy. I will say I am not a Spanish speaker. I took high school Spanish and really enjoyed it, but never continued with it. So I can't say like my Spanish is definitely subpar. It's interesting though, because when you go somewhere, and I feel like when you're sick, a whole different thing kind of takes over you. You know, you just have this one set mind, like, oh my gosh, I'm feeling so terrible. I need relief, whatever it is. And the people there were actually phenomenal. Going into this like little pharmacy that was in town there, it's awkward. It's really awkward, but the people there made me feel better about the experience. I'll say that. But it's weird. It's weird feeling like you kind of can't communicate. And they did their darnest. And somehow I ended up getting the help that I needed. So,
Well, I understand that, Kelsey. Once upon a time, I got sick in Germany when I was playing basketball, and all of the feelings that you had, I had. And although they started learning English in third grade, the fact that they just spoke English made me feel so much more comfortable, made me feel as if I can actually tell them what was wrong with me, and made me feel like I could be heard. And the reason that I think representation is so important is because if you have that outlet or that person or that commonality with a particular provider, you may be more apt to give them more information or to be able to connect to the point where my favorite question in my pre-op interviews isn't what are you allergic to or have you had any problems with anesthesia in the past? My favorite question, to some degree, I ask, where are you from? Because I know the type of diet that people in Pittsburgh eat. They put French fries on things. I know what I love from the St. Louis area. Even a commonality as small as food to cultural instances or cultural familiarity, that can break down so many walls and not only improve the patient experience, but the care that you can actually give them because you can get more information. So representation, not only from a skin color perspective, but from a relatability perspective, from culture to language to basketball teams to whatever the case, to know that there's another human that could potentially understand you makes all the difference in the world. So that's why I feel like representation matters.
that's a great point. Dr. Gould?
I do want to say this. Myself and Dr. Ford are the only CRNAs of color that are chapter authors in the nurse anesthesia NAGLE book. Let me just bring this up. In 2003, when I was a nurse anesthesia student, right? Now, this is the 7th edition. When I was in the program, it was by NAGLE, the early edition, and Karen Plouse were the authors, right? I think it was the 2nd edition for me, right? So when I was in the nurse anesthesia program, I had two small children. I had a 5-month-old and I had an 8-year-old. There were certain books I just could not afford when I was in the nurse anesthesia program. And that was one of them. Didn't have that book, but I had to borrow it on a consistent basis with my classmates in the program. And all I remember was, number one, there were no authors that looked like us, right? There was no photos that looked like us, right? So fast forward to around COVID time, that's when we were asked to be authors of the book. Chapter 3 for me, chapter 19 for Dr. Ford on neural anesthesia. But when they asked me to write it about cultural competence in nurse anesthesia practice, I had asked Dr. Sassalisha from Kaiser Permanente Nurse Anesthesia Program, is it possible if I could just outline for you for a moment of what I'm not going to do, what I'm not going to write about? What I'm not going to write about is a list of 10 things that you should know about Black people, the 10 things you should know about the Hispanic community, the 10 things that I didn't want to do that. I want the nurse anesthesia students to read what is purposeful, what is useful that they should know. The very first thing that I write about is that racism is a public health crisis. I wrote about workforce diversity and how important that is. I wrote about Black maternal health and how important that is, because I'm not really terribly sure in the OB anesthesia courses, are we actually teaching about Black maternal health? I'm just not sure about that. But so I inserted that in that chapter. Another thing that I did was purposeful, intentional, was I added a photo of Dr. Fred Reed, who graduated from Union University Nurse Anesthesia Program, Black male nurse anesthetist, who was a nurse anesthesia resident. At the time, he was a student, and he was standing in front of the anesthesia machine. I made sure that picture was inserted, and it's inserted today in that chapter. Because again, in 2003, there were no chapter authors that looked like us, and there were no photos of anyone that looked like us. And that was all intentional. So I do want to thank Dr. Sassalisha from Kaiser Permanente Nurse Anesthesia Program for asking me to write this chapter. But, hopefully in the future that more CRNAs of color are being asked to be chapter authors in that book.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's such an incredible story. And for those listening who don't know what Nagelhout is, it's like our anesthesia Bible. It's kind of what everybody uses in every school. Everything comes from Nagelhout. So it's such a cool thing to even be taught by someone that has written one of the chapters. Dr. Ford, can you tell me, what does it mean personally, or what does it mean to you to be one of the authors of Nagelhout?
It's something that I couldn't imagine, honestly. And before I go any further, big shout out to Chris Simmons, who was the former program director at Duke University's nurse anesthesia program, who texted me the other day for my birthday. And I appreciate you so much, Chris. But without that connection with her, I don't think I ever would have been in the book. However, I will say, either as an aspiring RN or a CRNA, I would encourage you to take advantage of your opportunities, because I would lecture at Duke University free. I mean, I would just do it because it was something that I wanted to do. It was something that I wanted to get experience at. And at that time, I was the neurosurgical clinical lead for CRNAs there. So she didn't have time, and I said yes, not knowing how impactful that opportunity would be going forward. I still say yes too much, but I'm a little bit more aware of the impact that things have. So to have people recognize me, I think I can sum it up in a story that I probably would never really tell. One of the events, so 2 years ago was the first time that Dr. Gould's organization partnered with Midwestern to have an airway and information session. And my cousin is she's an RN. She's in the neuro ICU. Her name is Samaria. I love you. Her name is Samaria. And she was able to come to the event. And after the first day of the event, she only knows me as her big cousin. She doesn't know me as this anesthesia person. And later, after the first day of the event, we all went to a relative's house, and she's telling my family, "This dude is a big deal." I had no idea people looked at him like that. He just smells and steals my French fries and stuff. She was like, this is amazing.
Yes,
And
Maria, your cousin is a huge deal.
and to know that, this is somebody that I held and loved and, just want to be a role model for her to see the types of opportunities that can be afforded and the types of things that she can aspire to and the type of impact that being in the nurse anesthesia Bible, that which is Nagelhout, the weight that holds, it means a lot.
Yeah, I think one thing that was really cool is watching both of you interact with the nurses at these conferences, and you're so uplifting, and they look up to you. And I'm getting chills right now because it was just so cool for me to see the impact you had directly on these students. And Dr. Gould, I've even seen you on Instagram where you're like reposting like SRNAs or recent graduates, and you're always just advocating for these students and these CRNAs. And I'm getting choked up. I just think it's so incredible to watch what you do for these future CRNAs.
Thank you for that. The thing is that everything stems back for me from the mentors that I had. They both imparted in me to make sure that I pay it forward, right? So when we have our diversity CRNA information session, airway workshops for the weekend event, we invite 4 program directors that will speak about their respective programs. And that gives an opportunity for the nurses, the ICU nurses, diverse ICU nurses from across the country to actually ask them questions right there on site. Many of them, just like myself, I'm first generation college graduate. A lot of them are first generation college graduates. So it is the early professional socialization that is so vital to the organization and the success of the program, right? So it's not just meeting for nurse anesthesia program directors, but then there's CRNAs that are presenting on different anesthesia topics. And these nurses are looking at someone that looks just like them. And then there's nurse anesthesia student panels that we have from different programs. Some of them are single and have kids. Some of them are married and have children. Some of them are taking care of a loved one while they're in the nurse anesthesia program. This is a great opportunity to ask questions of us during that information session. And then on Sunday, there's the airway workshop, right? So at that point, now you received all the information on Saturday. On Sunday, now you have all hands on. And you actually can start to feel and you can see yourself going into that trajectory, right? But you're supported by the CRNAs, the nurse anesthesia students that are there, to go along with you during your journey. So it's very important for this type of organization. Now, mind you, this happened as a poster project back in 2003. And now we're having our first event this year. There's 5 events this year. The first event in April will be my 72nd event that I have. And I'm very proud of that. And as a result of that, over almost 1,200 CRNAs of color have gone through our diversity event, have graduated in over 90 nurse anesthesia programs. We make sure that those nurses are supported fully, and we have free, and I mean free, personal statement reviews, so that if the nurses who attend our events, CRNAs from across the country will critique it and send it back. We have free, and I say free again, mock interviews. So we have that also right before they have their actual interview, and they're a lot more comfortable. Another thing too, I just want to say is not just to have the access to come to these events. That's one thing that I do on a regular basis. But for the profession itself, and the profession needs to change, it has to change. There was something about barriers. There were barriers in the profession when it comes to the GRE exam, right? So that's a barrier for us. And I had to a couple of years ago, I think it was 3 years ago, I wrote an article. It was myself. It was the program director at VCU, the program director at Duke University at the time, Chris Simmons. There was a PhD CRNA, Black male CRNA at University of Alabama. We wrote an article about eliminating the GREs, adopting holistic admissions to diversify the nurse anesthesia profession. So we wrote the article first, and then we actually presented it the following year at the AANA faculty meeting, right? And we had to talk about this, and first time, just having this dialogue with the faculty so we can change not just the face of the nurse anesthesia profession, but also the culture, right? And break down those barriers.
Well, because that's how it starts.
Right.
It
Right.
starts with school. Obviously, there's not going to be representation if people can't get into school, and so that's
Right.
where it needs to begin. So I think I read that article about the holistic admissions, and to be honest with you, I completely agree with the whole GRE. Get that out of here, man.
Right.
It's interesting just listening to both of your stories because I just feel like, especially Dr. Gould, with you just talking about with Dr. Goldie Brongman about, I think it sounds like it was really impactful for you to be able to see yourself kind of reflected in that leadership. And so that is why it is such a big deal that, Dr. Ford and Dr. Gould, that both of you were able to contribute to Nagelhout, because it's like, not only are you in the textbooks, but like I said, you are reflected in leadership and also in the history of the profession. So I think it's really important for these, this next generation of CRNAs that they see that.
I'm glad you brought up Miss Goldie Bragman. The thing is, just on the 19th, which was Monday, was Martin Luther King's birthday.
She cared for him, didn't she?
Exactly right. Exactly right. The listening audience should know this about her. In 1951, she started the nurse anesthesia program. So she has a very diverse student cohort every single year. She has a very diverse faculty every single year. She was the program director from 1951 to 1986. But in 1958, Dr. Martin Luther King came to Harlem for a book signing. And for some reason, a woman came and emerged from the audience that was there, stabbed him in the chest. So emergently, he needed to go to the nearest hospital. What's the nearest hospital? Harlem Hospital. Who's the CRNA? The nurse anesthetist that was on call? Goldie Bragman. And a lot of nurse anesthesia students do not know this information. So I put it out there every single year that this is part of our history. And it is not shared, unfortunately, in books that we had to read ourselves before we went into the nurse anesthesia program. But this is very important to me.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for sharing that. Such a really, I saw that picture. It's really that does belong in every single textbook for sure.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. I am almost embarrassed to say I just found out about that a few days ago on Martin Luther King Jr. Day, and it's such an incredible story, and I do wish more people knew about it. Like if I wasn't involved with what I'm involved with, it's not something that I think is widely known, and so I think it's incredible that you keep sharing that information and spreading the word. So next question here. One thing I wanted to ask is, where have you seen the most progress in the recent years, and where are we still falling short? I know there's still a lot of work to do. Are there still misconceptions about diversity or any initiatives that you wish people understood a little bit better?
I'll speak from the recent perspective. So I graduated from VCU in 2016 and got my doctorate from there in 2017. And over the course from graduation until today, there's a number of things that I see differently. Well, not that I see differently, but I see that have changed. First is the awareness of nurse anesthesiology as a profession. Once upon a time, it used to be considered the best kept secret in healthcare, but now nurses of all hues and backgrounds, they are more familiar with it. I get way more questions just about anesthesia in general, which I think is awesome. Something else that I see differently is there's more advocates for representation in anesthesia than when I was preparing for school. I didn't even know about Lena's organization as I was preparing for school. And now some of the things that people are the most proud of is having attended one of Dr. Gould's sessions with Diversity CRNA and the preparation that they've been afforded. I've seen more faculty of color. I've seen more faculty of diverse backgrounds. I think one of the biggest misconceptions in my world, and Nicholas, you're with me a lot because you're at Midwestern, but I think the word diversity is a trigger word in today's culture. But the standards that are required to get into anesthesia school only continue to get higher. We're starting to see more people with diverse backgrounds meet the already high standard that it takes to get into anesthesia school. So when I think of diversity, I just think of more excellence. I don't think of any decreasing or sidestepping or dumbing down or anything like that. I just think there are more people that are more aware, that have committed to trying to bring the level of excellence that it takes to be a nurse anesthesiologist. And with that being said, I'll just leave it with, once upon a time when I first graduated, I told somebody that I was a CRNA. And the first thing they said was, CNA? I was like, no, there's an R in there. And we do a little bit different jobs. Now, when I tell people that I'm a CRNA, they have a much more heightened awareness of what that means. They may not know exactly what we do, but they know anesthesiology is at the core of it. So I just think public awareness as well as awareness within the profession has heightened greatly.
Public awareness is crucial in diversifying the nurse anesthesia program. So in our social media spaces, right, for what I do, it's very important that photos, images that look like you, that look like the community is out there. So I have the nurse anesthesia students. I have the ones that are accepted in nurse anesthesia program. I have the ones that just are newly credentialed CRNAs, pictures and videos. I have pictures and videos of diversity CRNA events from the diversity workshops that we have, or the HBCU. When we go to the HBCU, the schools of nursing, and we talk, the nursing students, we bring our own anesthesia equipment through a grant by the MBCRNA that I received a couple of years ago, and we go visit these schools. But the thing is that we need to introduce nurse anesthesia to nursing students of color early, before they graduate from nursing schools. Many of them are not even being told about the nurse anesthesia profession until way later, after they finish, their schools of nursing, they pass their boards, they find out about nurse anesthesia later on in their professional life. So when we go visit it's not just the HBCUs, the historically Black colleges, universities, but we'll go to Hispanic serving institutions, schools of nursing too. So it's very, very important that we show up in spaces like that. And one more thing about representation is not just increasing the diversity within the nurse anesthesia faculty roles, which is very, very important, but also for those that are in specialty areas like advanced pain management fellows. We need to have more of CRNAs of color in that field, to have PhD researchers. We need to have CRNAs of color to be in that space as well. Again, the educators, and also too, and a lot of times we don't even mention this. It's not just about the educators that you think, you're thinking of the ones that's in the classroom. I'm talking about the educators that are clinical coordinators and the chief CRNAs. We need that in every aspect across the country to make sure that we, as a profession, are actually doing something like that. So it's very important. The representation is important, but we need to fill those roles, especially that's severely, severely underrepresented.
To your point about reaching people before they get to nursing school, one of the things that myself, Dr. Morgan Morrow, Dr. Maria Earl, Dr. Dorian Tate, Dr. Jazz Coley, with the Arizona Association of Nurse Anesthesiologists, at least once a month, we're out in the community going to high schools, and we're trying to even reach middle schools to make them more aware of what CRNA is, how it's impacted our lives, and how it can potentially change theirs. There's many schools, and we go to a lot of Title I schools that oftentimes think that the CNA, and that's a respectable position, but that's all they know about healthcare. And that's because they have someone in their family that's a hardworking, great person that's a CNA. However, they may feel that nursing or medicine or whatever is out of their reach. So at least once per month, we're out to schools in the Phoenix metro area trying to spread the word about what nursing is, what nurse anesthesiology is, and how it can impact their lives. In the middle school and high school realm, a pair of Jordans will change somebody's life. Hey, you can get all the Jordans you need, baby. Just take a look at anesthesia. And that has actually piqued more interest than cool pictures or
you got to be able to relate, honestly.
Which is why I need to buy another pair of Jordans. Thank you.
There you go. Chalk it up to that. Got to be able to relate.
Yeah, absolutely. And truly, whatever we can do to expand the knowledge, because if we look at it, and Nicholas knows this about me, the only thing I know as well as anesthesia is basketball. And if you think about diversifying the pool, the NBA has done this over the past number of years. where now most of the best players in our league are from other countries. And nobody seems to have a problem with that. However, if you try to expand the knowledge of anesthesia within our country, some people kind of ruffle. They get their feathers ruffled with that. And they have the right to their own opinion and feelings. However, again, we are just trying to expose the noble profession of nurse anesthesiology to as many qualified and capable people as early as possible.
I've been doing this for 20, 21 years. For the first 17, 18 years, I've always invited AANA leadership to come to our events, whether they current presidents, past presidents, CEO, NBCRNA, COA, come to our events. Past 2 or 3 years now, I've changed that a little bit, where instead of having the keynote being from AANA leadership, now I invite CRNAs of color to come and speak about their respective specialties. And that's very important. So we'll have someone like Dr. Nelson Aquino from Boston Children's Hospital, and he's speaking about transgender care, anesthetic considerations. We're having someone like Dr. Karen Smith, who's the highest ranking Black CRNA as far as in the military is concerned. And we need to speak about that. We need to have someone speak about PhD opportunities. We need someone else to speak about advanced pain management that looks just like us. So that's the representation that we're talking about, that we don't necessarily hear in the nurse anesthesia program or necessarily see even at the state and national meetings. But things need to change. And you have to do that with a diverse team, even the ones that are making the decisions.
Yeah, Dr. Gould, I actually saw, I think it was a Facebook post recently from one of the kind of pipeline events. I think it was at a HBCU. I think it was actually at Howard. And I read the caption, and it ended with a poem by Langston Hughes, which I thought was really appropriate. So it said, "Besides, they'll see how beautiful I am and be ashamed. I too am America." And I think that's a really powerful statement, that I too am America, just because I feel like it's not only the heart of the poem, but I think really kind of the heart of this episode. I think we really need to talk about with future CRNAs. I think with us too, with Nicholas and I kind of being in that space now, I think it's our responsibility. It's everybody's responsibility within this anesthesia community to open doors. But I think in order to do that, we also need to examine kind of why they were closed in the first place, and just make sure that next generation doesn't ever have to ask themselves if they belong, because they 100% do.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
And as we wrap up this episode, I just want to ask one quick question. Is there anything that gives you hope about the future of nurse anesthesia, or is there any one piece of advice that you can give to prospective students who kind of feel discouraged about applying to CRNA school?
Sure. In the academic setting right now, I get a chance to talk to all sorts of people that are curious, that are fearful, that are amazed, that are amused by the prospect of being a nurse anesthesiologist. The biggest thing that I can relay, and it's actually something that I've been telling myself for an untold number of years, but it's really, you are enough. We don't need cookie cutter anything. We just need inspired people to be themselves to come provide anesthesia. The one thing that I'm really encouraged by is that there are opportunities now to meet people that may look like you or be from the same cultural area, be the same geographic area. The profession of anesthesia is so much more diverse now. It's easier to see people that you could potentially relate to and get more information, get shadowing opportunities, get all sorts of things that can lead you in the path of this profession. So I'm very encouraged and honored to be able to be a faculty member, to be someone that people look at and say, wait, I can do that. Because honestly, I am an older version of a little child from East St. Louis, Illinois, that just says yes too much. And you can come from wherever you came from with the proper guidance and information, and we will help you get to becoming a nurse anesthesiologist if that's what's in your heart.
I love that.
And then Dr. Gould, any last piece?
As far as the admission process is concerned, we can help you with the personal statement. We can help you with the mock interview, but you still have to show up as your authentic self, at the school itself. And then it's at that moment, and it's at that time that you sell yourself, but in a genuine way. Only thing we're doing, the both of us are doing, is planting seeds. That's it. And hopefully, when they do become CRNAs, they're just reaching back, just like Goldie Bragman and Art Swirling did to me, and say, please pay it forward. That's it.
I think that's a great lesson. Pay it forward right there. Great way to sum things up.
Well, as we close today's episode, I just want to thank Dr. Lena Gould and Dr. Vincent Ford, not only for their time, but for their leadership and commitment to changing the landscape of nurse anesthesia. Representation matters in the classroom, in textbooks, and in leadership and at the bedside. And today's conversation is a reminder that diversity is not about checking a box. It's about excellence, equity, and ensuring the future of our profession reflects the communities we serve. To our listeners, your presence matters, your voice matters, and the profession is better because you are in it. Thank you for joining us for this special episode. We'll see you next time.